Being a YouTuber in Germany can be a bit tough sometimes. There are fairly robust privacy laws which can sometimes affect me, but many members of the public tend to think that those laws are a lot stricter than they really are, which means that I do spend quite a lot of time explaining to these people that yes, I am allowed to film in a public street. But there is one circumstance where the laws are particularly strict and, in my view, justifiably so. I would never, ever film at the scene of an accident where people have been injured or killed. And neither should you. I could end the video right here, but you know me, I like to go into these things in a little more depth. So let's do that, but with the usual caveat that I am not a lawyer, and so this is not legal advice. I have to say that because I don't want to get any nasty letters from actual lawyers. I'd like to begin with a recent event that was reported just a few days ago. In the town of Memmingen, criminal investigations have been launched into a 67-year-old man who was caught filming paramedics at work trying to save the life of a 44-year-old man. The younger man had suffered some kind of medical emergency, exactly what that was I don't know, and had to be resuscitated, carried from his apartment and taken outside where paramedics continued to treat him. Unsurprisingly, a small crowd gathered and the police had to order people to leave the scene. But the 67-year-old, who lived in the same building, continued filming with his phone from his balcony. The police repeatedly called for him to stop, but he didn't, so they went up to his apartment to talk to him. And sure enough, the man had been filming the incident and had even deliberately zoomed in on the patient. That is a criminal offence, which can result in a fine or, in very serious cases, up to 2 years in prison. The specific case he's being investigated for is violation of intimate privacy. This makes it illegal to take photographs or make videos of people who are in a helpless state or who are dead. This section was added to the penal code quite recently and protects the most intimate forms of privacy. The same section also makes it illegal to take photographs of people without their consent in rooms that are shielded from public view. For this reason, it's sometimes called the paparazzi section. But we are particularly interested in the paragraphs about people who are deceased or in a helpless state. And what is a helpless state? Well, that's when a person is unable to help themselves. They might be, for example, incapacitated after an accident or a heart attack, or they might be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. It was, as you've probably guessed, the rise of social media that prompted this law. It's based on the idea that being out in public doesn't necessarily mean that you have absolutely no expectation of privacy at all, and you should be able to defend yourself against people who want to use your suffering for clicks and likes. I should point out, though, that this is one of those crimes that normally isn't investigated unless a complaint is filed with the police. I'd say normally, in a case like this where the victim is unable to do anything and somebody is very clearly violating the law, the police can and will take steps. Of course, if you're filming or photographing somebody who has given their consent, or you have some legitimate reason for doing so, something like scientific research or journalism, anything like that, then in theory at least you shouldn't get into trouble. On the other hand, you do have to consider that the simple act of filming or taking photographs is in itself already a crime, even if you don't actually publish or distribute anything. And this is probably deliberate, because this whole thing is part of a much wider problem. So let's turn to a different section. Failure to render assistance. This is punishable by a fine or up to 1 year in prison. If you do not help somebody in need, even though you would not be putting yourself at risk, that is a crime. And you risk the same penalty if you get in the way of people who are trying to help, which means that you can in fact be arrested if you make it difficult for firefighters, paramedics, or other emergency workers to do their jobs. And this is, in fact, the point. People standing around gawking, whether or not they're actually filming, can get in the way of emergency services and therefore put lives at risk. And even if the emergency services are not there and you're just standing around, you're not doing anything to help. Either way, you're going to fall afoul of this law. This is also the case if you're in a car driving past the scene of an accident and you slow down or stop just because you want to get a good look. In addition to the laws I've already mentioned, you're probably violating several traffic regulations. This includes regulations about things like, for example, blocking the road for emergency vehicles or operating a device like a phone or a camera while driving. And the upsetting part of all of this is that these laws are necessary at all. Unfortunately, it does sometimes happen that drivers not paying attention as they pass accident sites cause more accidents. And in situations where every second counts, getting in the way of paramedics is more than just an inconvenience. Although there are no good statistics on this, it does seem that the situation is getting worse. Now, obviously, I don't need to tell you that you should never get in the way of the emergency services, or that taking advantage of somebody else's suffering and misfortune for personal gain is morally bad. But if you are visiting Germany and you find yourself in this kind of situation, what do you need to bear in mind? First, if you see somebody in need and you can help, then help them. Even if the only thing you can usefully do is call an ambulance, that's what you do. If not, then get out of the way of people who are helping, and under no circumstances should you take photos or videos. If you're driving past the scene of an accident, you'll probably need to slow down and drive extra carefully, but don't slow down just because you want to get a good look at what's going on. Keep your eyes on the road, concentrate on driving, and if you're given any instructions by police or firefighters, follow them to the letter. In fact, you will have to be more vigilant than usual. In one particularly horrible case, a young boy was thrown into oncoming traffic in an accident and initially survived and tried to get to safety, but was then run over by several cars because the drivers were looking at the accident instead of the road in front of them. And be aware that other drivers might not be as considerate as you and might suddenly brake because they want to get a better look. And of course, there is the famous German rescue lane. If you find yourself in very slow-moving traffic that might have been caused by an accident, you need to do your bit to clear a space for emergency vehicles. If you're in the left-hand lane, you need to move over to the left. If you're in any other lane, you move over to the right, but without blocking the shoulder. And this is actually required by road traffic regulations. Failure to comply can result in a fine of between 200 and 320 euros plus a 1-month driving ban. In other words, show some common sense and some consideration for others, and you'll be fine. And stay tuned to this channel, subscribe if you want to, because pretty soon I'm going to be doing a little traveling so I can make more videos just like the one that you should see down there.